How's it going, everybody? My name is Antonio, and today I have James Sykes on the barbecue, and we are doing a complete company profile on Baselode Energy as a marketing package that the company is paying for. Now, Baselode is a uranium exploration company that is listed on the TSX Ventures Exchange under the ticker symbol FIND, which is supposed to mean something, I hope. And they listed exactly 3 years ago, and they have already made a near surface uranium discovery at one of their 3 projects that they have in Canada, in the best place to make a uranium discovery in Canada, on the planet, actually, if I may add, although subjectively, with that being the Athabasca Basin, of course. And I also have Joel Friedman, besides having James on here. That's Baselode's CFO, as well as Cameron MacKay, Baselode's VP of Exploration and Development, in the conversation today. So instead of losing any more time here, James, thank you for investing your time with me today.
Always a pleasure, Antonio. Happy to be here.
Pleasure is all mine, and I'm looking forward to this. Although we know each other, this is supposed to be a very broad discussion, but also in depth. So it's going to be a long one. And let's kick it off with I guess with you, and then we'll move on to Joel and Cameron. And we're going to be going over my 10 Ps. And the first one is the pitch. So 10 Ps, 10 words to start with the letter P. And let's imagine we met in an elevator. I held the door for you. I noticed that you're not getting enough sleep, and I ask you, hey, what's up? What do you do? What would you tell me?
This is supposed to be the pitch for Baseload, or give them
Yes.
the real reason I'm not sleeping? Oh, geez, man. Yeah, Baselode Energy, it keeps me up at night, and there's a good reason why. It's an exciting company. We've got near surface mineralization that looks like it's amenable to open pit style of mining operations, and we're up near a mill in northern Saskatchewan, the Athabasca Basin area, which is home to the highest grades of uranium that you can find in the world. So Baselode Energy is on the right track moving forward, and we currently have drills ongoing, trying to discover where more mineralization will be on the project, and things are looking great for the company moving forward.
I also, wait for it, find it an interesting story how the company came to be. So why don't you why don't you tell me the story again of how Baselode really became Baselode? And I guess specifically talk to me about the Athabasca 2.0 versus the Athabasca 1.0 strategy for making a uranium discovery, and also maybe the Athabasca 0.0, because that was the original strategy there.
Yeah, 0.0 works right into 2.0, but the whole story really accumulates down to 2 things. The ore group, back then being power ore, we're looking to get into the uranium space. They had a project, a cobalt silver project in Ontario, which guys behind the company, Stephen Stewart and Charles Beaudry, saw what was happening in the uranium space and saw that and realized that things were going to take off in nuclear space and in uranium again. Charles has worked in the Athabasca. He knows the area. He knows uranium. He's got certain ideas. So he and Stephen really put the idea together to launch into the uranium space back in 2019, and they're just trying to find the right guy. Fortunately, at that time, our paths crossed. They reached out to me and said, we've read your bio. We've heard some good things about you. Your name comes recommended to us, and this is what we're trying to do. And it happens that I was kind of looking for something new, and this was an exciting opportunity back into something that I really love, uranium exploration. I think it's the greatest thing in the world. It's a lot of fun. I'm a firm nuclear bull. So if we can find the fuel to feed energy for the world, I think that's awesome. And yeah, Athabasca, high grade uranium. There's a certain art form to it. Like there's a lot of good groups that have made discoveries out there. The Fission Group, the ISO, Steve Blower, Andy Carmichael group. A lot of these people have repeat successes, so you really bank on the companies, right? The companies with successes, because there's a certain art form to this, and certain groups have it. I think Baselode definitely has it, and I think our strategy, which is Athabasca 2.0, really really brings that forward as well. And that's, it's the economics that really make sense for these type of discoveries. Athabasca 2.0, the thesis is that we're looking for near surface, high grade uranium that are hosted in the basement rocks with no sandstone cover, but there's sandstone cover, there's leeway to it. And they're amenable to open pit mining. So you don't have to go to these great depths for a very hot, high grade pod. Like, you take the McArthur River Pod 2 example. If you take a cube that's 40 meters by 60 meters by 80 meters, you just give it a dummy density of 2.5. That gives you that's a really light density to it. But anyway, so you take that 20, 40, 60, or 40, 60, 80, sorry, 25% U3O8, and you've got a 250 million pound deposit in a very small footprint. If you can discover that within 100 meters of surface or 200 meters of surface, you've more than likely got the best uranium deposit in your possession. And that's what we think is possible with the Athabasca 2.0. And that's the whole strategy, is exploring specifically for those style of deposits. We do think that there are more basement hosted deposits out there. Last 20 years, some of the big discoveries that have all been basement hosted deposits, over 700 million pounds. Arrow, Triple R, Millennium, Rough Rider, and not Rough Rider, J zones combined, and Griffin. That's 700 million pounds in basement hosted rocks in the last 20 years. So if you take away the sandstone, you get rid of this 300 meter, 500 meter deep sandstone, just remove it, boom, it's all gone. Basement rocks, basement hosted mineralization starts right there. Even if some of the basement rocks are removed, you're that much closer. So it makes sense. It makes sense. And the history of the Athabasca 0.0 is rooted in open pit mining. The open pits built all of the mills in Saskatchewan. So this is a tried, tested, true methodology. This is something that is unique. And I think it was easy to lose focus on by maybe having horse blinders on for just constraints on what is possible with geology. But when you kind of see things a little bit differently, and now that we know, we've also got 50 years of increased knowledge based on new geophysics, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of meters of diamond drilling. We've learned a lot in this area. So as a whole, and like I said, I think that proves with a lot of companies and a lot of groups, people who are continuously making discoveries in this unique part of the world.
If the Athabasca 0.0 strategy was that good, why did we even move to 1.0? Like, were companies just chasing higher grade to go and report to shareholders, or was it maybe a permitting thing? I mean, imagine an open pit mine in Canada today with the current leadership. It's hard to imagine, right?
It was the higher grades. It's very simplistic. The last open pits in northern Saskatchewan were the Sioux deposits, and those were when did they actually close down? 2006, 2007. Maybe later, but they were operational in 2005, 2006. They were mining high grade uranium in places. They're mining 20% uranium in an open pit at Sioux Sea. Like if you read some of the tidbits you can find about it, in 24-hour period, they pulled out 1 million pounds of uranium in a 24-hour period. Do you know how ridiculous that is? That is crazy. That's the beauty of high grade uranium. That is Athabasca. When you find these insanely high grade nuggets, it's a joke. 1 million pounds in 24 hours. Hey, come on. There are mines that can't even put that out in 5 years. 1 million pounds would have fed the state's production last year. So that's the Athabasca is great, and that's why they went to the higher grade materials. MacArthur River, you can't joke about 25% U3O8. You just can't fathom it. And like, I've held the core 80% core from McArthur River, and there were rows and rows of 85% U3O8. The value of that rock is uncomparable. It's priceless. And that's why they go after it. Cigar Lake has those nuggets. I've held the same thing at Rough Rider. Rough Rider had 2 zones of over 80% uranium. They weren't huge, not MacArthur River huge, but you're still holding 80% uranium. Arrow had the same thing too. You get these core, just these insanely high grade cores of 80% uranium. And that's how you build tonnage so fast. So yeah, Athabasca 1.0 made sense, but I think that there's a lot that was missed by not fully evaluating the potential of the model that was in place, and that's just being a mountainous basin. I think that there's a lot of new applications that we can apply to this area that demonstrates that not all has been discovered, and we're seeing that. How many discoveries have been made in the past 10 years? It's like every 2 years there's 2 discoveries being made.
Right.
They seem to occur in pairs. It's weird. Yeah, just go back through a lot of company news releases and compile everything. You'll start to see what I mean.
No, I know what you mean, and there's many challenges around that. I guess we'll be talking about that towards the second part, possibly towards the end of the video when we get to the next P, which will be the problems. But so you've made this discovery right now, and we don't know much about it yet. We don't know exactly how big it is or what the average grade is going to be, but there is something there. We know that much. We'll be talking about the projects too, is another one of the P's specifically. I'll talk to Cameron, I guess, more about the projects. But what is really the goal here with this Athabasca 2.0 that you're telling me about? Like, how do I make money on this stock? I own this stock myself. Fair disclaimer, not as confession. Do I wait for someone to buy you out? Do I wait for you to go into production and get a dividend out and get a re-rate based on you being a cash flowing company? What am I looking for here to make money on this stock?
Depends on a lot of things. We obviously want to do what's best for our shareholders. We don't want to make the wrong move. We want to make the most educated and thought out move possible. We would look out for our shareholders and act in their behest. What are we looking for? Are we looking for a takeout? It's not a bad scenario. I personally would rather see this move forward on my own end, but that's a very personal creed, simply because I think it'd be a cool experience to have this interesting deposit that has a lot of things going for it technically. Again, based on hosted rocks, you could do a lot more with them. There's a ground stability control that you can use to your advantage through engineering with basement hosted deposits. So that challenge is something that I am honestly up to, and I would love the ability to bring it forward. But if what we have looks attractive enough to another party and they take a bid on it, if everything looks good on our end, it's the decision, again, has to be thought out. We have to weigh the pros and the cons. We have to do what works for the best interest of all of our shareholders.
I would normally ask here, how much money do you have to spend before I make money on this? But it seems like it's early days.
It is early days, but this is a project that when we've crunched the numbers on it in so many different ways and just adding variables here, there, and everywhere, it's not a very costly project. And even on the exploration side, which is where we're at, I think outside of this drilling, there's not a lot more that really has to get done at Accio after this season. I think that this would be again, it depends on what we find. It depends on what we find. We'll still have target areas, but it won't be to the scale of 7,500 meters, 10,000 meters. We'll have some technical work to get done and just do some ground testing, geotechnical studies and things like that, which is why we've thrown in an exploration portion to this program this year, is we are looking for the next discovery within the area. And we've got some targets that I'm excited for. I in a way, I would love to be drilling them now, but I'm an explorationist. I just love being part of the whole discovery phase and seeing a target, putting all your hopes and dreams and bets into this target. Turns out, yes, that's the best thing ever. If it doesn't turn out, it's like, oh, darn it. Where did we go wrong on this one? Look, everything looked great.
We'll definitely talk about where you got that from, because it's, I mean, you've done that before and you felt the taste of finding a discovery and how it is. So
it's addicting.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. I mean, especially if you're finding like $20,000 rock, right? So, well, no, but why I'm asking about the financials and how much more money you think you're going to spend on this is because obviously I'm thinking about dilution as a shareholder. I want to protect my ownership in the company, of course. And so right now it's some 40 million in market cap after going as high as 100 million and above early on, before you even had a discovery. Talk about crazy markets. How's the share structure looking right now in terms of shares outstanding, options, warrants, and treasury and stuff like that?
We're good. We're still tight. At least I consider us still tight. So even after the discovery, we are at about, and after this raise that we just completed, so we did raise $5 million, all flow through. Awesome raise. Very happy with that. And I'm glad that we had the full commitment to it. So we're putting that all to good use at Accio this summer, and hopefully with some more of that exploration work. But 103 million shares outstanding. So we're right around a mark that I'm happy with. I've never wanted to see a company get over 200 million shares outstanding. So we've just hit that halfway point. As far as, I got to look off screen here now. Stock options. So we've got 12.5, and then warrants outstanding about 20.5. 11.5 million cash in the bank after this raise, and about 6.5 that is all in flow through. So we're in a very good position to really move this project forward and get all the drilling done at Accio, and even hopefully have some remainder cash that we can put towards potentially more geophysics down the road.
Did you have the prices on those warrants, strike price?
Yep, I do actually. I'm going to look off screen again too. So the average strike price is about 90, but there's a good chunk that are coming off in August of this year. How much? About 3.5 million at 75 cents. And then another. So
well, look at you being pessimistic, saying that they're going to come off. Maybe they get exercised.
Yeah, we'll get there. So between August and November of 2023, we've got about 12 million warrants that are all expired. We've had a very successful warrant execution rate to this date. I'm very happy with most of the people have been exercising their warrants. There have been very few that have missed out. The last set that were executed that were exercised, were at 40 cents. And I participated in that. I was part of that. Small in portion, but I still feel very strongly that 40 cents at that time was a super bargain price for Baselode. I think that we've got a lot better road ahead of us. And then after, and a lot of those are between 48 and where's it looking like 75 cents. So they do have a higher price, and we're going to try. Obviously, we want to get that share price higher than that. We want to incentivize people to benefit from their support that they've given us in the past. There are the set that are coming off in November 2023, which are at $1.15 and $1.60. So can we push that high? I would love it. I would really love to get our share price that much higher, but kind of battling uphill in a market that isn't the most favorable, and there's not a lot of eyes on things going on. However, nuclear and uranium space is coming back around. So I think that investors will come back into the uranium space en masse as they seem to do, and Baselode is nicely positioned to benefit from that.
Yeah.
As far as the options go, we've got 12.5 options. I personally have about 3.25, 3.5 million options, and there are quite a few that come off at 10 cents, but that's not until 2025. So there's about 3 million options at 10 cents by 2025. So not a huge number in today's world with our 100 million shares outstanding.
Hmm.
And then after that, it jumps up to 56 cents, but still 2027 or would be the remaining 8 million warrants that would come off. So still years away, and hopefully by then that our share price is much higher than $1.50 type of range.
I was just wondering who owns your shares. Like, have you placed those shares primarily with retail investors, or is it institutionals, insiders?
Primarily institutional, but through the brokerage firms. So in a sense, it is a lot of retail. There originally, when we formed and we did a lot of our first raises, we went to a lot of retail that we knew personally. So even the seed round were a lot of personal and business transactions. First financings were a lot of retail people that we knew and people that followed my career. And then kind of after that, we've relied more on the brokerage firms to I guess provide the retail. But there are a number of, if you want to call those institutions, then those are our institutional base, and I would say that they're the most dominant. As far as the insider ownership goes, it's about 15% insiders, and the majority of that, so 12 to 13%, is held by QC Copper and Gold, sister company in the Ore Group, and then the other 2 to 3% are insiders. So directors, chairman, myself, technical team, our administrative team, and we've all got options in the company. We've all got some shares in the company.
Okay. Then you said 11.5 million in cash, 6.5 net.
Also have to cut you off because I did forget to mention about the ETF, which to me is I think it's a big win. Having an ETF supporting a company, I think it shows that there is a reason for this company to be watched, and it's good support. So we've got about, again, another 10 to 15% of fund held openly by the Sprott ETF URNM. So that's a very, very strong position for the company.
It does make your stock more volatile, I guess, on days that the ETFs have redemptions and that they're issuing shares, I guess, because getting on and off these ETFs can be quite the train ride. Yeah. Okay.
We've seen the good and bad in it.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. And I've been along for the ride, and it can get painful sometimes. But on the upside too, when things start moving, it can also be nice to see, continued buying and increased volumes because of that. So I want to talk about the cash, because you have 11.5 million in cash. You said 6.5 million of that is flow through. What is your burn rate ex drilling? So if you don't count drilling, how much money are you spending on offices, G&A, promotion, all that?
On a monthly basis, about 80, 90.
Okay, that's decent.
Yeah.
So it's
as soon as we start drilling, though, so those costs actually do change, because as soon as we start drilling, we take some of those costs and throw them into the project. So our personnel, whenever we're not drilling, those personnel costs become more of a general application. But as soon as drilling starts, a lot of those personnel costs get thrown into the budget of the drilling. So it's a variable.
Okay. So how much would drilling be in a normal year? I mean, this year you're doing 10,000. What are you spending, 5 to 6 million on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
we've budgeted for 6 million, but I'm hoping that we will come in less than that.
Okay. So G&A is I mean, I would have to look at my calculator here, but it's like less. It's about a 1% of your expenses. I know it's a bit more, but I mean, it's a good number. Is that how you plan to keep it going forward? Low G&A and putting money in the ground, because I know that you'd occasionally stop drilling and exploring when you don't think that the market will appreciate the value add, the potential value add. So what's the strategy for that ratio of G&A to exploring expenses going forward? Like, do you plan to keep putting most of the money in the ground?
We always have to explore, but yes, there's a trade-off at some point for ACCIO to move forward. And kind of mentioned earlier that we do have to do more technical studies. At some point, we've got to bring on the engineers, or at least start contracting out to the engineers, and they can start working and guiding us on what needs to be done. That adds a whole new layer that takes away from exploration, that we don't have to implement on exploration, that we can do smaller programs, still costly to a degree, but not as costly as the exploration that we are doing currently. At least I don't believe that it would be. So the goal is always to have as low G&A as possible, but not one to the detriment that hinders your company and you can't move forward. Like, there's always a balance, right? And I've seen both spectrums. I think, at least I think, I'd like to believe I have. So we try to find a nice balance and work with, try to do what's best for moving the company forward. With we don't need to be super frugal, but we don't need to be ritzy glitzy either.
Okay. What is gonna, because you said you're not going to be doing as much exploration after this year's drill program. I mean, not as much.
Not at ACCIO itself. Sorry, okay. We've got plenty of targets around ACCIO. We've got plenty of targets on subparallel structures. We've got plenty of targets regionally, and that's just on Hook. We've got plenty of targets to drill at the Hook project, and then you throw in Catharsis, which, oh geez, we've got 40 drill targets. So if you want to put in 10 drill holes a year, there's 4 years of exploration. So there's a lot of work. Bear's going to get up there. Bear could have 2 to 3 years. Shadow's got 1 year of exploration work. That's all we'd want to get done on Shadow. Just get some airborne geophysical surveys done. Pop in maybe 10 holes or less, and we could be out of there. We could be done. We could know everything we want to know. We could be happy with our decision to either stay or walk away. And that's all we're trying to get done with Shadow, and have been since day one, basically.
Okay. I know that Cameron is waiting to talk about the projects more in depth. And I guess this covers my primaries. So we've done 2 peaks by now. We did the pitch and the primaries. A third one would be the people. And again, I'll be talking to Cameron and Joel here in a minute. Let's first figure out who you are, I guess, Mr. Sykes. Tell me, who are you, and why do you think you're worthy for the CEO position at Baselode?
I think I'm good at what I do. I have a lot of passion and love into what I do, so I pour my heart and soul into it, and I think that has paid off. It's allowed me to achieve what I wanted to do. It's no different than a songwriter going out there and writing the song that they're the most happiest with and doing the best they can. They do it because that's what they love to do. Or somebody building cabins or anything like that, or structures, just like artisans. I mentioned artistry before, so it's a unique art form, scientific art form. That's, just fell in love with. So it's and again, kind of fits with the whole nuclear strategy. I was raised in Elliott Lake, Ontario. It used to be uranium capital of the world. We have a model of the atom in the town. So it's our statue is an atom. Our high school sports teams were the Atoms. So it's very nuclear centralized town. And my dad was a uranium miner. Kind of grew up with it, but not really knowing too much about anything else, like nuclear energy and things like that. There were no nuclear plants up there. We just mined the stuff and it went into nuclear fuel, which is why Simpsons was kind of funny. They could have made a show about Elliot Lake. But it's it kind of stuck with me. And then when I got into university, when I started floating around, just looking into different types of subject material, came across nuclear technology, took the course, loved it. It was so cool. It opened up my eyes to a lot of things and started looking into more energy applications and other technologies out there. And nuclear just kept ticking all the boxes. So when I got into study geology, then in my second degree, I floated around. I'm a space nut too, so I started thinking more spacey type of geology. It's like, nah, that's going to be hard to get a career in. And obviously volcanology, because everybody loves volcanoes. But no, it's too academic. Then exploration geology just really hit a chord. So then things started clicking, like, hey, yeah, my dad mined this stuff. You have to explore for this stuff. That sounds cool. I know where there's uranium. There's uranium up in Elliot Lake. Hey, let's go there. And then started learning about economics and things like that. Everything starts piecing together. Unfortunately, got a job with Denison Mines back in 2006. Ages ago. Man, it's what, 17 years, eh? Oof. Yeah, it has been 17 years in the basin in Saskatchewan. So, yeah, started with Denison Mines. Spent a year and a half, 2 years with them, and learned a heck of a lot very quickly. Because of their JV with Cameco, I got to go on a site tour of Millennium, and that was awesome. Seeing what a mineralized deposit looked like, and seeing all that white clay. And then when I was relogging a lot of historic drill core coming across that same white clay and being like, oh, this is cool. We've seen this stuff before. And then there's a little bit of mineralization. That eventually became Griffin. And then even just working with the guys who were at Denison back in those days, great guys to learn from. Veterans in the field and really knowledgeable, smart guys. Taught me the ropes on geophysics, geochemistry, core logging. So it was a great group. Then I went to Forum Uranium after that in 2008. Unfortunately, that was the global market collapse of 2008. So I would have loved to stay with Forum. Great group of guys. I think they're some of the best geos out there. Very smart guys, and they've definitely got a passion for this as well. But yeah, 2008 happened. Fortunately, Hathor had made their discovery at that time, and Forum got me the job with Hathor as a logging geologist. So 2009, I started on with Hathor, logging some drill core from Rough Rider. So after seeing mineralization from Millennium, proto mineralization that eventually became Griffin, other little snips of mineralization there. I'd been on a field tour in 2006, so I got to see core from Key Lake, from MacArthur River. So I've, being 3 to 4 years into my career, seeing a lot of uranium deposit, the drill core in different styles, and you can start piecing things together. So Hathor working on a deposit and seeing what happens when you're within mineralization. And I think a lot of things clicked for me at Hathor. It's when I came up with my own little fluid model and structural model. Rio Tinto took us out. Wasn't a big Rio Tinto fan, just not my cup of tea. Went to Next Gen in 2013. Started with Next Gen. We drilled a couple projects. We drilled Rook. We loved Area C, which became Arrow. And yeah, Arrow writes itself. February 2014, we discovered Arrow. And yeah, after Next Gen, kind of went off, did a couple different things. Got into rare earth elements with Athabasca Energy. We also stayed on the uranium basis. They had projects in Elliot Lake, which was kind of one of the reasons why I went there. Just curious to see if we could really move Elliot Lake forward, but unfortunately, I don't think in today's market that would really fly. but that's why the Athabasca is so lucrative, just because of its high grades. And then as I mentioned earlier, Baselode. They they scouted me out in 2019, and I think everything just clicked and jived, and great bunch of guys to work with.
What do you think is next for you? I mean, if you manage to get Accio into production, get it through all the challenges and everything that there is to mining, do you think you're the best CEO for a uranium mining company? Do you even want to do it, or do you want to do something else?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the challenge. No, I'm down for it. We wouldn't be a big company. That's one of the things with this. Like it's so small fries. This is not a huge asset or something that's going to be around for 100 years. This is a small little thing, small little operation that I think can be done very cost effectively with the right tools, right implementations. I think you can have a lot of green technologies out there to run that won't require a lot of energy consumption. So you don't need large plants or anything like that. The mines are all taking hydropower from Manitoba anyway. So if there's capacity on any of those, you can tap into there. A lot of the solar wind applications are possible to spread around. So it's and then you can automate a lot of things too, possibly. Like I like the idea of belt sorting. I like the idea of just sorting mineralization to make that more efficient to go down to a mill or to get milled. But so I think there's a lot of opportunities for a small company to have less of an overhead cost as well, which goes a long way to make a run of a smaller deposit.
But so you're determined to see this thing through
as far as possible, yeah.
But this is not.
But that's kind of one of the reasons behind Athabasca 2.0 is we don't want to make a discovery. We want to discover a mine. So it's kind of it's a proof of concept that if we can bring something into production, maybe if someone else can bring what we find into production sooner than what other companies are trying, I think that is a huge testimony to this strategy, and that's kind of what we're trying to push for.
Right. But this is also not the only venture that you manage, though. What part of your time is needed and invested and focused on Baselode specifically?
A lot. There's definitely a lot is focused on Baselode. Like I try to keep everything as balanced as possible, and right now I do think things are balanced. So it's fortunate enough that Baselode does needs a lot of love and attention, which it is getting now. And having the crews underneath, like the team and the support is phenomenal with everybody within the company. So within Baselode, our technical team, they're brilliant. They can implement everything. They take care of all the logistics, permitting, planning, everything to get these drill programs operational. And it's wonderful. There's not a lot that is required from me for that to happen, and that is the bulk of what we really need to do. Then it comes to pushing the story out. That's really my bag. That's my area of expertise. And we didn't have a lot going on in the past 6 months. So when we weren't drilling, I was able to shift focus onto other ventures and put more attention into there. So it's everything tries to stay as balanced as possible. Sometimes they swing a little bit more in one way than the other, but it all typically balances out in the long run.
Was there any point?
I don't try to do what I do in life without really wanting to. I'm not the type of guy who will just go and be like, yeah, all right, I'll do this just because. Typically when I do things, it's because I want to do them. Right. I don't like failing.
Right. Nobody does.
Love to be successful. No.
But is there a point in time in the future of Baselode, where you say, okay, this company is going to need my full attention. Let's figure somebody else to be at the helm of the other ventures.
Ready to cross that bridge when we get there, for sure. It's already been conceptualized, not just by me, but by others. You know, it's something that it's in our playbook. It's in our playbook of things to mitigate if it has to happen, or you know, however things have to be dealt with.
But I mean, it's probably also an important thing to manage for your own personal income, as in, you know, you're not taking a huge salary out of Baselode because you can split that cost across the companies that you're active in, which is good for Baselode shareholders, but not as good for you if you have to step down from one of the other companies. So how are you going to manage that?
Again, we'll make it work. I am not a greedy man.
You're going to make your kids work. You know, I know you.
Oh, absolutely. I prefer options, to be honest.
Okay.
That's I would work for options to a certain degree.
How much?
Sorry,
I was going to ask, how much of your money have you invested alongside me here? So how much of your money? What's your average cost? I guess because you told me how many shares you have.
My average cost would probably be around, it's about 35 grand. Yeah, okay. It's the most I've ever put into any company that I've worked for. So yeah, I took a good portion.
Okay.
So yeah, that's and then I received a lot of shares, not just from signing, but I also worked the first 6 months that I worked were share-based compensation as well. So again, I like the idea of shares, so I will sacrifice what and when is needed to get some paper that way. Okay. I believe in Baselode running forward. I believe in Baselode moving forward with the uranium market.
All right, James. So thank you for that overview of well, I guess of yourself and your own financial position. We're not going to be talking about the financial position of your kids anymore, I promise. Joel, now I guess Joel, now on to you. You're the CFO for Baselode, but also a bunch of the other companies that the org group is involved in as well. So why don't you tell us who are you and why do you think you're the right man for that job?
Yeah, so my name is Joel Friedman, as you've introduced. I'm currently the CFO with Baselode Energy Corp, as well as all the other org group companies. And in that role, my oversight is on all the financial and regulatory reporting. So with that comes, I think I joined the org group a little over a year ago. So it was in the spring of 2022. We have our regular quarterly reporting, annual reporting. Those come with our audit. So all that financial reporting. Then we get into our other stock exchange or securities requirements, and beyond those foundational components, I support the team. And when we look at allocation of capital or budgeting, our focus has been where possible to focus on creating value, putting money into the ground, and also when we look at the strategic side, how can we create new opportunities and how can we best finance the companies and do it in the most accretive way. So looking at Baselode, especially this year, one of the things we've recently completed has been doing flow-through financing, because we're putting, Baselode is focused on our deposits in Saskatchewan. We want to be putting the money into the ground. That's how Baselode is creating value. And when we do flow-through financing, which is unique in Canada, and it's really in that junior exploration in the minerals space, as well as it can be done in oil and gas. But because we're not revenue generating or income generating companies, we're able to do it to pass on the tax benefits to the shareholder. And what that means is that we can raise money at a premium to to the stock price. Currently we recently did a deal at 48 cents, and the stock was trading at 40. So when we look at dollars into the ground and what an existing shareholder is getting, it can effectively be accretive. And similarly, and we did within the group, American Eagle Gold recently had a strategic investment from Tech Resources, and that we took really the flow-through financing structure to another level, which was using a structured charitable status. So we actually, if we looked at Baselode, I think when we entered into that deal, you were looking at something like a 20% premium for the flow-through. When we look at the structured charitable financing with American Eagle, you were looking at a 60% premium.
Yeah.
So when you look at it for an existing shareholder, when you look at capital coming in, if it can actually be value accretive to the current position, I look at that and say, if we can achieve these things, it's really win-win. And we want to use all the tools in the toolbox to get that money into the ground.
So, but it sounds to me like you're doing a lot of work, and unless you've made a clone of yourself, doesn't that mean aren't you spread thinly? How do you manage to do it for all these companies?
So I have within the group, I have a small team. There's three of us, which is if you were to take Baselode and benchmark it to a similarly sized organization. I mean, the valuations are down now, but a year and a half ago, Baselode with 100 million market cap. And it could be very normal if you look at the junior mining space for an organization like the scale of Baselode to have a role like myself that would be full time, and maybe the team would be smaller, but we work hard to get our work done, and I think the structure within the group allows us to focus our energy at the time when needed on the company that needs it. So we have some times that are very busy, and we commit ourselves to getting the job done and doing what we need to do to achieve our business obligations. There's busier times. Recently we closed, I think we closed about 4 transactions in 1 week. That's a busy week. And as I'm sure you're aware, these transactions don't happen overnight. Those can be the culmination of long terms, but we use the different parts of the team across the group in order to make what we need to get done. It's not a small amount of work. There are times when we feel like we could use a deeper team, but I think we try to balance that out. And so far it's been going well. I've been with the group a little over a year. Collectively, I think we've done 28 quarterly or annual filings, which is it's a big effort, but it's about trying to create optimized processes and efficiencies. So these normal processes and decision making are more routine. And when we're doing it all the time, it's not a one-off that is individually a Herculean effort.
You want a deeper team, and Stephen wants a deeper balance sheet. So it's sort of a team effort. You got to make it work somewhere in between. You're talking about transactions. Most of the times when you say that to retail investors, at least to me, what I'm thinking, and that's not what you mean, I know, but it's going to make sense in a second. What I'm thinking is transacting a project to, let's say, a bigger company or major or something like, making a discovery and then selling it on to a major, sort of the dream here. And also a potential option for some of the ore group companies. Have you had any experience doing that, like selling a whole company or a project to a larger company?
So when a few organizations ago, I worked with Primero Mining, which was its primary asset was the San Dimas mine in Mexico. When I joined Primero, it was to support the finance function, and ultimately it was going through a strategic review process. And over my time with it, it sold off 2 assets. One was a smaller exploration, one was an operating mine. One the first one was in Mexico. The second one was in Timmins, so that was the Black Fox mine. It was sold to McEwen. And then ultimately, Primero as a whole went through a friendly acquisition with First Majestic Silver. So the San Dimas mine, which was the key pillar of Primero, is now I believe it's now the largest and it may be the lowest cost producing mine inside First Majestic Silver, which is, if you're not familiar, is one of the larger silver producers, and they're wholly focused in Mexico. And as a part of that, you go through the whole transaction process. Again, doesn't happen overnight. It's months long, and then when it happens at a corporate level, there's post-transaction transitions, and you need to work together collectively to make it the best product available at the end of the day.
Right. Okay. What about, talk to me about yourself as a person. Like who's Joel Friedman beyond the CPA with almost 15 years of experience? What do you like doing? What do you not like doing? Are you married? All these things.
I'm married, and I have two young ones. So currently,
You're not sleeping. Like you sleep 2 hours a night.
I do a little better than that. I'm very lucky and fortunate that I have a phenomenal wife who allows me to get involved in something like the OR group and commit myself, which is as you indicated earlier, not a small commitment. And then otherwise a lot of focus is on them. I have a 3.5-year-old and a 6-month-old. So as you can imagine, outside of work, that's the primary focus, and we spend a lot of time at home and with family, working with our village to cultivate them.
Nice. So the focus is on them. Congratulations, by the way, on the baby. Why? I mean, it seems like you have a beautiful family. I haven't seen them, so let's just assume they are. Why would a young guy with a good degree, good experience, and a beautiful family want to work for the OR group? Like, what specifically that attracted you to the OR group? It's not like there's a shortage of good companies out there to work for. So how come specifically this one?
So I think it started with the people. I met Stephen, I think about 7 or 8 years ago. There's an organization called the Young Mining Professionals. Stephen was involved in that. That's where we originally met. And then I guess it was about 6 years later, we reconnected and we talked about new opportunities. And one of the things I like about the OR group is, one, we have exposure to different commodities. And when we look at baseload with uranium, which I think is a very exciting time, and yes, valuations are down now, but I think the future is bright. And it's the ability that I saw within the group to build new things. When I first met Stephen, there was ore finders, and since then, ore finders has now become ore cap. It's going to have more of an investment focus in the mining industry, in addition to its primary, say, land assets. But since then, you grew QC copper and gold, and there's a takeover of Mustango, and then the creation of Baselode and Metal Energy and American Eagle Gold. And with that, I view there being a lot of interesting opportunities. And it's not just one. We're not able to, we're not building one entity where everybody is being focused to progress itself and add value. The other thing that I found really attractive, or that I felt, was that within the group you've got, say, what I view as being the most advanced is along that, say, project timeline is QC copper and gold, and it's working towards its updated MRE. So you have a copper asset that has potential to progress towards development. Then we have when we look at Baselode has made its discovery back in the fall of 2021. And so you have a uranium one that's made a very interesting discovery, and we're building on that. And eventually, we hope that will move along that project trajectory. And that's 2 of 6. And then we look at ore finders in Mustango, and you have organizations that have been able to, now it's Agnico Eagle, but you entered into option agreements with Kirkland Lake, and on 2 sets of properties, and then we move forward to. Those were the foundations when I joined, and then now we look at American Eagle, and we've been able to bring in, and I think it's hats off to American Eagle CEO Tony Moreau, but he cultivated a relationship, and we brought in Teck Resources, which is anybody in the mining industry knows how big of a deal somebody like that is. So when I look at the successes that have occurred, and the, for lack of better terms, the track record across a small population, these are things that excite me and say where the group has been able to bat above average. And I'm sure you've heard the metrics of one discovery or a potential discovery to a mine is like 1 in 10,000, and then we look at, you combine that with putting money into the ground, and if we look at our G&A ratios for 2022, probably the heaviest company when we look at the overall cost was probably Baselode, but Baselode put $15 million into the ground, so 700,000-800,000 in G&A is sub 10%. I think at the high end, American Eagle Gold might have been at the higher percentage, and we put $2.5 million into the ground or into exploration, and so with G&A of say base case run rate of 600,000 a year, you're still in that low 20% ratio, which I think when we look at the junior market, that's attractive. That's we're putting the money where it creates value, and the structure of the group really allows that to happen. I think by utilizing the group, when we think about back office and administration and securities filings, being able to leverage expertise because you're doing things. When you do things for one company, it's when you have to do it for 6 companies. It doesn't multiply by 6. There really are efficiencies there, and that allows us to keep a lower cost base than some of the others in the industry.
Right. Is this the focus when it comes down to balance sheet management, trying to figure out how to spend as much money as possible on exploration versus G&A, or is what else comes into sort of your balance sheet management principles, I guess, if you want to call them that?
I think there's 2 things that are important there. One is we want to optimize money into value creation, and if we're looking at somebody like Baselode's value creation is going to come out of what we can do with the resource. Baselode is solely focused in Saskatchewan. We have Akio, we have Catharsis. There's Shadow. And there's some new land packages that were staked. Everything there was staked and is royalty free. But we want to optimize what goes into the ground, because if the optimal goal is that the Baselode or the land package or ultimately becomes a mine one day, that's the goal at the end of the day, is for us to make our impact, and the discovery to turn into a resource, to turn into something economic, and to get there. That requires the money to go into the ground. It doesn't require the money to be spent on overheads if we can avoid that. So I think that's a key component of managing our assets or our resources. The other component of it, when we look at balance sheet management, is keeping ourselves in positions where we're able to, I guess, act as proactively as possible. And a part of that means doing as much as we can to ensure that we can finance when the windows are open, when the opportunities are there, and when it makes sense. We don't want to. The ideal situation is we don't want to be doing it when you're running out of money. You want to make sure that you have adequate timeline in terms of managing the company, that you're in the position to make those decisions based on when it makes sense, and not put in a position where, if we look at American Eagle Gold, last summer after Nevada was, the company pivoted from Nevada where the initial money was raised and it went in. The company was trading at 2-3 cents. Had we not had successes, we had successes with NAC and the company, that share price recovered. Ultimately, we were able to raise money in January of this past year in 2023 at 20 cents. But the dilution effect of that versus if we had to have raised at 2 or 3 cents is it's tenfold, and the impact of that would have been significant. So we want to maintain hard dollars that allow us to have appropriate runway to make reasonable decisions.
And with Baselode specifically, how do you see the G&A evolving over time as you're drilling more? Because you're talking about the ratio. When you're drilling more and you're doing more work, do you expect the G&A to be going up as well? Like, is it reasonable to expect Baselode's G&A to be more next year than it's going to be this year, and this year to be more than it was last year?
I think when we look at a base case scenario where we're continuing to move down that project pipeline, but at this point we're doing exploration drilling. So if there's a transaction where whether that's land packages or some sort of M&A, if something like that were to occur, like that would be a spike. Those would be unique. But on a base case scenario, the G&A shouldn't dramatically increase. It should not follow the increase in exploration dollars. The G&A should be contained. When we look at exploration, last year we put 15 million to the ground. This year, right now, we raised 3 million of flow through at the end of 2022, and we recently closed in tranche 1 and tranche 2 about 4.5 million. So that takes us up to that 7.5 range. If things make sense and we do more financing, we could expand what that exploration program is. But benchmark to last year's 15, where it's going to be lower. That's not going to mean that the G&A is going to come down. It's going to mean similar to the G&A not going up. It should run within a fairly tight range. I think about those things as really being more step variable. So if things were dramatically changing in terms of what we were doing, boots on the ground, we can do more drilling. You can have, instead of 1 rig, you could have 2 rigs or 3 rigs. That shouldn't really change the administrative side or the management side of the company. Things like more projects, more physical locations where you'd have to expand the management team to support that. That's where those changes would happen, and those aren't in the pipeline right now.
Right. Well, I like hearing stuff that, like what you just said, where you might increase the workload in terms of trying to discover value for us shareholders, without increasing the necessarily the paycheck in office. All right, that makes sense. Okay, well, thanks, Joel, for that overview. And Cameron, now it's on to you. You're Baselode's VP of Exploration and Development. Well, you know what? Talk to me about that. What's that position? What does that mean for you? What do you have to do specifically, and why do you think you're the right man for the job?
Well, currently I'm tasked with overseeing all of our exploration activities, from dealing with permitting applications to sort of the broad strategy of how we explore for uranium in brownfields or greenfields projects, and then how we drill off our known assets, which in our case is Akio. So coming up with the strategy of how we are going to eventually work to defining a mineral resource, and then also generating new targets so that we can add value on the greenfields front. So those are sort of the main tasks that I like on a broad overview. But also, because we're a junior company, there's a lot of day-to-day operations that fall on my plate as well, from managing the fields and the team. I spend a lot of time in the field, which I really enjoy. And just mentoring the young geologists as well, and just basically executing the vision of the company for targeting these shallow uranium deposits that we're interested in finding.
What is your background? Why do you think you're the right man for that job?
So depends how far you want to go back. In grad school, I spent some time up in the high Canadian Arctic, mapping on Baffin Island, and so I have a good background for mapping. Kind of gives you sort of like a jack of all trades skill sets, because you're looking at the geology from lithological relationships, identifying rock units, and then also interpreting the structures on sort of a broad regional scale. And you get a lot of exposure to really experienced field mapping geologists with the Canadian Geological Survey. So I have a good sort of I'm not really a specialist in any one thing, but I have sort of a good background in structural geology, geochemistry, bedrock mapping. So that's kind of what I did during grad school. And then as an explorationist, I sort of cut my teeth with another company, Purepoint Uranium, who have an asset along the Patterson Trend called Spitfire. So everyone obviously knows about NextGen's Arrow deposit and Fission's Triple R, and just a long strike to those to the north is Purepoint Spitfire. So I was there the year after discovery, and then really helped sort of delineate and understand the structural controls on that particular deposit. So I spent about 5 years doing that. I have a bit of a background too in some base metal work I did up in northern Manitoba at the Lalor mine, and I've also done some mapping and prospecting and work up in the Northwest Territories in the Great Bear Magmatic Zone. So I have a good, broad. I'd say my biggest strength is I'm a very good generalist. I know a lot about a lot of things, a little about a lot of things, but not a lot about one thing. And I think that having a little bit of a background in bedrock mapping, it really helps in any deposit type, because there's a lot of things that you can pull from having a lot of experience out on bedrock, observing relationships in the field that can be applied to drill core. And it's unfortunate that a lot of the young geologists nowadays don't get a lot of that field experience, where they're out on hiking through the bush and looking at outcrops. And it's sort of why I got into geology in the first place. I think a reason why a lot of people get into geology, but it doesn't happen as much anymore as it did in the past. But I'm very fortunate to have that background.
So how did you end up working for Baselode then? That was right after Purepoint, I believe.
Yeah, basically. in 2020, when the pandemic hit, nobody knew what was going to happen. And so it was kind of everybody was battening down the hatches in the spring of 2020. And Purepoint kind of let all of their staff go at that point, because, of course, there was a lot of uncertainty at that time. And then, obviously, there was a lot of cheap money that ended up flowing out of the pandemic. And so there was a lot of money for mineral exploration. So things started to pick up rather quickly. And I had a few offers on the table, but they were generally for sort of contract work. And I didn't really want to do that. So I sort of took the summer off, spent the time at the lake with my kids. I had 2 young boys at the time, and waited for sort of the offer that I was waiting for. And the uranium exploration world in Saskatchewan is a very small world. We all kind of know each other. And James gave me a call in the fall of 2020 and kind of explained what he was thinking about the idea behind Baselode as a company, his Athabasca 2.0 thesis, and sort of the projects that he had staked at the time, I had a look at them. We talked for about an hour, and I had a contract on my that came across the next morning, and we've been working together in a positive way ever since.
So when you looked at the projects that James had at the time, which one did you like the most? Because I think
Shadow
you didn't have
one.
all of them,
no,
right?
Yeah, no. Shadow was the one that like kind of sold it for me. So like Shadow, we haven't unfortunately been able to do as much exploration on that project for a variety of reasons. But that one is on what's called the Virgin River Trend, and it's this major crustal scale boundary that cuts right through the center of the Athabasca Basin. It's a very underexplored trend. There is a few deposits and showings along it, but it sort of intersects the basin sort of perpendicular. So very quickly you get very, very deep. And so that project is staked outside of the Athabasca Basin on a really, really prominent structural trend that nobody's really done any work on. Even historically, there's very, very little work. And just to give you like some context too, like that structural trend, like it turns into what's called the snowbird tectonic zone. And actually, when I was a graduate student, we were mapping like an extension of that goes all the way up onto Baffin Island, and then it's interpreted to go all the way across into Greenland and potentially into Scandinavia as well. It's a very, very major crustal scale structure. And we know that a lot of these structures in the basin are fertile. The one in the east, the Wollaston-Ujadic transition, is the one that's the most heavily explored because it's sort of on the periphery of the basin. And so all of its expression is relatively shallow because it sort of skirts the edge of the Athabasca Basin, whereas the Virgin Trend, like I said, it very quickly gets very, very deep. And so it's been sort of underexplored. So that was the one that sort of sold me with the company initially. And I really liked the Hook project as well. I've always, going back to my time at Pierpoint, like there's always been this, in my opinion, a very like strong bias towards drilling these graphitic conductors, and like there's nothing wrong with that. It's been an exploration strategy that's worked out really, really well in the past. But I always thought that it was very biased because like what you're doing there is you're actually targeting graphite. You're not targeting uranium. Graphite's a really good EM conductor, and it does highlight structures extremely well, and it gives you a very refined, defined point to go and put a drill hole and then explain your geophysical anomaly. But a lot of these deposits, like they're all basically hydrothermal structurally controlled. And I always had this notion that we were missing out on a lot of stuff by sort of blindly focusing on EM conductors, because you can have a similar set of structural conditions where you'd have, dilation and breakage, post-Athabasca breakage, where you'd have, fluids either drawn down into the basin or else form unconformity deposits, but we're not looking outside those graphitic corridors. So I think there's a lot of ground that's been sort of underexplored, and that was kind of what we saw on Hook. And so that sort of drew me to Hook. And it's obviously been proven to be correct, because we are way outside any EM corridor, and we have, good high grade globally, moderate grade by Athabasca standards that we're seeing there, but it's definitely an unconformity associated uranium deposit outside of a graphitic corridor. So sort of proves that thesis correct.
So right now, if you had to pick one of your favorite children, not your actual kids, but the projects, what would you say Hook is like it for you because there's a discovery on it right now, or something else that excites you?
Yeah. Currently, Hook is definitely my favorite. There's a lot of stuff like now that we've made the discovery and we've sort of dug into the geophysical data too, like there's a lot of attractive targets on the project itself. So it's definitely my favorite at the moment. There's a lot of upside potential that I obviously see on Shadow. That was why I got interested in the company in the first place. I think it has good potential. Catharsis as well. I think there's really good potential on that project. But I would say if I had to rank order them, it would be Hook, Shadow, Catharsis. That would be sort of if I had to.
Interesting. I'll see what James thinks about that. But here's a little friendly pushback on Accio, right? That's sort of your star right now. But it is relatively small in terms of what we know right now. We don't know the absolute size yet.
Yep.
But it's also not as high grade as what we're used to seeing in the basin from your next gens or even your denizens, even your fissions, right? So why do you like it so much? Because you said the geophysics, but how would you translate that to me? I know absolutely nothing about geology. So how can I get as excited about it as you are? knowing that it's not as big and it's not as high grade?
The thing that's really exciting about the discovery itself is that, we go right from the base of the overburden into mineralization. So that's very unique. That hasn't happened in the Athabasca Basin in a very long time, where it's, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's at surface. That just doesn't, well, it does happen, but it hasn't happened in a very long time. So you don't necessarily need you still need to have the pounds in the ground to make it economic, but you don't necessarily need it to be, one of these super giant deposits to make it economic. So I think the mineability aspect of it is super exciting. And the other thing too is that I don't think that we've seen the end of this. Like uranium deposits, like many deposits, are, analogized to sort of pearls on a string. So it's like where you find one, you tend to find others, right? And that's true of a lot of mineral deposits. So, the old joke is like the best place to look for a new deposit is in the shadow of the head frame, right? So it's like, I don't think that we've seen the end of this. Like I suspect that there's other pods out there. So there's definitely like potential for growth and for, higher grades. And like we do have some stuff too, like where we have, 12 meters of over 1%, which is, that's a high grade hit by any standard. But the deposit as a whole, from what we understand so far, is not going to be like, like an 18% Cigar Lake type deposit, or even like, like a 2% overall, like we see at Arrow. It's probably going to be more in like the 0.2 to 0.5 U3O would be my suspicion for the deposit as a whole. And I think that there are probably ways like that this is going to be, proven to be economic. But we do need to grow it. Like there's just no two ways about it. There needs to be some more growth potential, and we need to find more. And I think that there is, a strong case that there's a lot of really attractive targets, sort of within the shadow of what we've seen so far for expansion and the discovery of new pods.
In the shadow of what you've seen so far.
Yeah, sort of like yeah, exactly. Sort of like the brownfields exploration.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just funny that because you have the project that's called Shadow, what is, I guess, to get a little bit more technical, and you don't have to blow my brain here, but some of the holes that have hit mineralization on Shadow have still hit it below the sandstone. So there's like a little bit of sandstone. It's like pockets of mineralization right below it, if I'm not mistaken. Like, would that be an issue? Because I know you guys normally don't love sandstone.
No, but I mean, I think in our case, we can essentially think of the sandstone in our case as overburden. We're not dealing with hundreds and hundreds of meters of sandstone. It's I don't want to say something out of place, but I don't believe we've intersected the sandstone lower than about 80 meters below surface. So like, yes, there is sandstone there, but it's not one of these situations where you'd be looking at doing a bunch of freeze walls and stuff like that. It's sort of still within the realm of removing it or added access. And the vast majority of our mineralization is that we've discovered so far to date is sort of to the west of where that sandstone wedge is. To be clear, I'm not a mine engineer. Like this is not sort of my world. My world is finding these things and understanding what they look like and how much is there. But it's not deep sandstone. We're not talking about hundreds of meters of sandstone. It's tens of meters of sandstone.
But if it happens a lot more, so let's say that you do find more, like how you want to grow the deposit, but it's all under as much sandstone as you have there, which is not a lot, as you mentioned. Is that just, talk to me again, as if I'm 5 years old. Can you just scoop it with, I don't know, with a shovel?
The best lenses that we have, so like we're obviously like thinking about resources and like how much we have. So we've sort of defined about 9 lenses that we're confident sort of hang together, and most of the mineralization that we see is in 3 of those lenses, and all of those lenses are not underneath the sandstone. So let's say 80% of the known mineralization that we have, that wouldn't be an issue. Now, if we end up finding, like some really nice grades and some nice thicknesses underneath the sandstone, we're not going to be upset about that. But that's a question to be addressed, down the road with the, mining engineers and stuff like that. But most of the mineralization that we see today that comprises Akio is that would not be an issue.
Okay, fair point. Now, what is most of the land around Akio in terms of infrastructure? I guess that's also interesting to talk about. Akio, and you share Akio actually with 92 Energy, supposedly, but it's high confidence that it is the same deposit. They call theirs the GMZ, I believe. I'm thinking about how to ask this question, but let's start there. Who do you think has the better side of the deposit? I know they would say they have it. You'd probably say you have it. What's your case?
I think right now, based on all of the drilling that's been done, I'd say right now we both have a fairly equal amount. We both identified a similar amount of mineralization. Obviously, we've modeled everything that they have, and I'm sure they've done the same thing with ours. And it looks roughly sub-equal at this point. And so the one advantage that I would say that we have is that it looks to me, looking at the geophysical data, that a lot of the mineralization is controlled by sort of this mesoscale fold. So like there's a fold structure that starts on our project and it goes up onto theirs, and then it closes and then comes back down. And so the closure of that fold occurs on 92 Energy's project. And most of the mineralization, from what I can tell, is controlled by a structure that's axial planar to that fold. So if you take that fold, the plane that bisects that fold, that's the main controlling structure. And so that closure, again, occurs on their side. But we have, so it closes on their side, but we have all of the length of that fold coming down onto our side. So we have, from what I can tell, we have more strike length to explore on our side of it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that at the end of the day, the best concentration is going to not be on their side. There's no way to know that for sure. We're too early in the game. But from what I can tell, I would say we have the more upside potential based on the deposit model that we're sort of running with.
I think they have reported a couple of news releases with higher grade, which got the market excited. But theirs is deeper too, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah, for the most part, they haven't. Most of their mineralization sort of corresponds with a lens that we've identified as like a D lens, but suffice it to say that lens certainly carries on to their project, and most of theirs seems to be associated with that particular lens, the equivalent of that one on our side. And to date, they sort of haven't identified the shallower ones that we have. Those ones seem to die off on our side of the claim line, or if they do occur, they haven't been intersected on 92 Energy side to this point. Okay. So there's, from what I can tell, is the bulk of their mineralization is in one or two east dipping lenses, whereas we have the bulk of our mineralization is in one east dipping lens, one vertical lens, and one west dipping lens. And that vertical one and that west dipping one seem to not occur on 92 east side of the claim line.
What does that mean for you?
I think, it seems like maybe there's that main lens, that what we call the D lens, goes onto their side, but then maybe there's sort of a splaying and a bifurcation where things open up into a larger number of lenses on our side. It looks like that right now, but I mean, obviously there's more drilling that has to be done on both sides of the claim line before we can say with certainty.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, makes sense. That's Akio specifically. That's Hook. We know quite a lot more about it now than you guys did when you joined the company. So as you said, I understand why you're more excited by Shadow. But maybe you can talk to me about Shadow more in depth as well. It's a large land package as well, but there's no immediate neighbors to it, which is also interesting to me. The Athabasca Basin, so talked about. This is a little bit outside of the Athabasca Basin. And everybody says it's the best place to discover uranium. Why is nobody around you? What are you seeing in it, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, there's nobody around us to the east and west, but there is to the north. So that structural trend is staked all along, the main structure. But in the as you move away from the structure, then there's nobody. But on the north-south, that's all staked up, which is obviously probably the most prospective part, because that is like the big collision point where you had, like two plates coming together. And so that's that like cratonic contact. So yes, there's nobody east and west, but like the structure of interest is all staked in all the shallow parts of the basin. Once you get into the middle, it's kind of wide open, but nobody really wants to drill a 2,000-meter sandstone hole and find something at the very base in the middle of the basin. So yeah, the other thing too is like it's like there's the Cameco's Centennial deposit, which is on there, but like there hasn't been really any other discoveries on that side, and I think that a lot of that is just a lack of work. And the reason that we call that project shadow too is like if you look sort of macroscopically at the regional magnetics, there's sort of a great big lozenge that runs through the Athabasca Basin, and on sort of like the far northwest side of it, that's where the Arrow deposit, Triple R and Spitfire are, and it's sort of like the mirror image of it where shadow is. So like if Arrow and Triple R and Spitfire are up here on this lozenge, like we're down here on this part of it. And so the thing about structure is it's fractal. So like what happens on a very small scale like blows up onto bigger scales too. And so given the same stress environment, so like given the same conditions which led to the deformation, or sorry, the formation of Arrow, Triple R, and Spitfire, which obviously like resulted in dilation on their side of on the Patterson trend. If the same stress was applied, you'd expect dilation where shadow is as well, and so you'd expect things to pop open in that exact same location and potentially have like the fluids, uranium bearing fluids, enter into the basement there as well. So there's a sound scientific reason why it makes sense. It's just whether or not you had the right fluids at the right time in the area. But structurally, it makes sense that it would break the same way as Arrow and Triple R and Spitfire did.
Okay, so that explains it. Because when I open up a map and I see the claims around it, they do indeed have neighbors to the north, obviously. I was just thinking that it might be a First Nations thing where it's challenging. Now, you've been down to the project, you spent some time there. How, like, do you ever see any people around it? Do people come and talk to you or something? I mean, give me a representation of what it's actually to be on the ground.
Yeah, well, there's like the reason that everything kind of like came to a head. I mean, obviously it was like during COVID, and like there was tensions were high, and the community that's closest to Shadow is Turner Lake, which Birch Narrows Dene Nation is the First Nation in the area, and for a lot of reasons, like they have been sort of they don't have a familiarity with the mineral exploration and mining sectors. There's lots of First Nations all across the province who have a long storied history of involvement with the exploration and mining sector, but just because of like geographically where they're located, there hasn't really been any projects in their area. We're sort of the first ones to sort of explore this idea. There's a little bit of work north of them on Kareen Lake, like back in the 70s and 80s, but that was more government funded. That was when SMDC, which eventually became Cameco, was poking stuff around there, and it was a long time ago. So they don't really have a history and a relationship and an understanding of how the mineral exploration sector works. So I think there was a lot of just hesitance, and because they don't have that history, that there wasn't a good understanding of what exactly that we were going to be doing out there. And so a lot of people were like rightly or wrongly, they think that we're going out there to build a mine, where it's just we're going out there to explore for something it's very green fields, and like and there's a disconnect between what we're actually proposing and what the community perceives that we're doing. So there's been a lot of discussion and back and forth with the community to try and educate people about what it is that we're doing. And the other thing I would say too is like any community, there's often a vocal minority of people who are strongly opposed to something, and then there's very often a silent minority that's very much in favor, and then there's a vast swath of people in the middle who are sort of indifferent or don't care or don't understand. And I think that was the case, and what happened is the vocal minority who were opposed, they sort of won the day. And that's just kind of how it went with that project. I'm very hopeful that we're going to get out there. The chief has been very receptive, and like council's been good, and like their economic development's been very supportive. They've been currently far more focused on they're working with NextGen about I can't remember what the name of the agreement is, but there's like an agreement that's been signed with NextGen, and for obvious reasons that's where their focus has been, is like in discussions with NextGen. So we're kind of on the back burner for them. So I'm hopeful, like, you know, like in the next little while, once like those talks are wrapped up, that they'll be able to like refocus and then like engage with us again, and then we can move forward.
All right, fair enough. That's Shadow. Let's hope you do. What about Catharsis? I know James likes Catharsis a lot. He likes all of them, actually, if I remember correctly. Last time that I've spoken to him. But what do you think about Catharsis? What's geologically significant there?
Catharsis, like it's right on that Wallace and Mujanic transition trend. So like you can extend a straight line like from Catharsis through Key Lake, McArthur River, Cigar Lake, like all those ones. It's the known mine trend. Like that's where all of the supergiant deposits are found, is on that trend. And we're just way further to the south than anybody's explored on that trend. And so then the whole thesis is, how big was the Athabasca Basin originally? What was the basin architecture like? How far away are we from the Paleo unconformity? So that if there was a deposit there, how deep would it have to be preserved and not scraped off by a glacier? It's a very sound theory, but like it's never been proven. So we've seen signs in drill core that, you know, like it looks like we probably are nearish to the unconformity. Like we see some paleo weathering that's very typical of the Athabasca Basin, but not typical of you know being like, say, if you go drill a hole for gold exploration in the Larange Belt, like you don't see that just like that very distinct paleo weathering profile that's associated with the Athabasca Basin. And we do see some evidence of that on the Catharsis project. So there's no like smoking gun to say, yes, like, you know, we are close to the unconformity, but the structures that if the structural controls and that we see on Catharsis were nearer to the Athabasca Basin or under the Athabasca Basin, they would have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of drill holes in them. It's just that they're outside the current margin of the Athabasca Basin currently. But the structure is exactly what she'd be looking for.
But so what you would be looking for there is something that's way deeper than what you have on Hook.
Well, no, it would have had to have formed deeper than what we have on Hook, but we're hoping that it will be closer to surface. So like take Arrow as an example. Like Arrow goes down a kilometer basically. Like you have high grade uranium going down the structure about a kilometer, which is crazy. No one thought that you could have that until NextGen found that. And then the idea being that like if you have a similar type situation, yes, like it would have been deep at the time. So the Athabasca Basin, maybe let's say there was like 400 meters of sandstone on top of the Athabasca Basin, and then you have an arrow forming a kilometer down. Well, how much did you scrape off with, you know, what is it, 1.5 billion years of, you know, glaciation and erosion and stuff like that. So yes, initially, like in past geologic time, it would have been extremely deep. But now after all that erosion, everything's been scraped off. So now then the idea is it would be closer to surface.
Okay.
Yeah. It's one of these theories that like it makes sound sense, but it's never been proven. So people are a little bit like skeptical of it, but it does make sense. So it's worth investigating.
But it is higher risk exploration, basically.
Sort of. I mean, all exploration is high risk.
Yeah, but I mean, what you're doing this year, 7,500 meters at Hook, is lower risk than the 2,500 meters that you want to do for.
100%. Yes. I mean, once you've found something, obviously your risk is down. But I mean, any greenfields exploration program, whether it's right smack in the middle of the Athabasca Basin or, you know, many kilometers out, has, you know, a success rate that's very, very low. So, I mean, yes, like any greenfield exploration is going to be high risk. If you're, you know, doing brownfields exploration, obviously, yes, you're going to have a higher success rate and a higher certainty that, you know, you're going to intersect something interesting.
Right.
It's a theory that's worth testing because like a lot of these like underexplored areas, like there's a lot of potential there. And like if like back to the Arrow example, like people knew about, you know, like the Patterson trend and the Dirksen trend, like on the west side of the Athabasca Basin for decades and decades, and like no one invested any time in it. Like it was all, everything was focused on the east. And then all of a sudden you hit there's one thing that happens and it's a total game changer, and then it seems so obvious in hindsight. And until you have a company go in and prove that concept, it's never going to get explored, never going to get found. So it's important to do these things.
Yeah, of course. No, I totally agree. Then you also have beer. This is new.
Yeah.
How did you guys pick it up? What's the idea there?
So the bear claims are, again, along that same like main mine trend. They're basically the same story as Catharsis, but sort of between Catharsis and the Key Lake mine. So it's all the same story, same sort of like the big major Wollaston Mujata transition zone structure that, you know, like the big mines in the east and the big deposits in the east are on. And those ones are just a little bit closer to the Athabasca Basin. So I think that they have good potential. The thing I like about a lot of the bear claims is like, so in the last uranium boom in, you know, the 2006, 7, 8, around then, there was a lot of, you know, like when there's a lot of money around, people get to test some of these theories. And so Forum Uranium actually had a lot of those claims and did test a lot of those conductors, those conductive trends and those structures along strike with the Key Lake mine to the southwest. Not as far as down as Catharsis, but they did, you know, like poke some holes around in there. And they did return several interesting and anomalous results that they seemed to be like, they never really went anywhere. Like they'd have like an interesting hit, but like they couldn't grow it. And so a lot of those conductive trends and like those structural trends were tested during the last uranium boom. But the highway that goes from where Catharsis is up to the Key Lake mine, it parallels the Haltane River, which is a major river in northern Saskatchewan. And so there's one set of conductors that's on the highway side, the west side of the Haltane River. And then there's a whole other set of conductors that are on the other side. And those ones have never been poked, just because logistically it's very difficult, especially if you want to use a skidder. If a helicopter, it's no problem. But because of access, like those ones never really got any work. So there's a whole structural trend that's very, very, very little testing has been done on it, just because there was a river in the way, and nobody wanted to use a helicopter back in those days, apparently. So very, very much untested on that side of the river.
Okay.
So a lot of the bear claims have some of that trend that's very much untested.
But most of the exploration that you guys do is helicopter supported nonetheless.
That's right. Yeah. And it seems like from a permitting perspective, like it's going, I'm not saying like you can definitely use a skidder, and like there are definite advantages to skidder use, but like when you're permitting and when you're doing First Nations consultation, if you're using a helicopter, it seems to be an easier sell because your footprint is so much lower. And then like putting in like a long road with a skidder where there's a lot of like tree disturbance and stuff like that. Like for instance, with Accio, like we've put now 22,000 meters of it in it, like as of today, like about that. And if you fly over it from the air, it just looks like a few holes in the forest, right? There's no big clearing events, because I mean, when you get guys out there with a skidder, like it's very easy to smash down trees, and then Ministry of Environment and First Nations get upset about that. But with a helicopter and a chainsaw, people clear the absolute minimum that they have to in order to get the job done, and you end up having a much, much smaller footprint. And so it tends to be an easier sell with helicopters. And in discussions with the Ministry of Environment, they've sort of hinted that, you know, they'd like to see things go that way, especially in sort of first pass greenfields exploration. It's like, why not have the lowest amount of impact that you can initially? Then if you find something, then you start thinking about putting in road infrastructure and stuff like that. Whereas in the past, like it's always been, you know, sort of blasting there with the skidder. But so yeah, like we're not afraid of using helicopters. We're very much accustomed to doing it, and it is an expense, but it's one that can be mitigated with, you know, a lot of careful planning.
What about other expenses, as in your your camps, how do they look? Are those like concrete camps, core shack? How does that look?
It's all tents, basically. So we use Weather Haven tents. So it's just an insulated tent with what's called a Toyo stove, which is a combination diesel electric. And so everything is, able to be flown in crates and then set up and then torn down. The only sort of like semi-permanent piece of infrastructure is like the wooden foundations, but it's essentially just rough cut wood to make a floor to secure all of the equipment to, or the tents to.
All right. Okay. I think I've gone through all the properties and all the interesting things about it. What am I forgetting to ask you? What's something interesting about those properties that you want to talk about, but nobody ever asks you?
Good question. I mean, it does get asked, I guess, but like a lot of people like are still sort of skeptical of the idea of like drilling outside of these major EM corridors. And I think that there's been too much focus put on like the use of EM. We've gone to using like high resolution magnetics, and so you can glean a lot of information about the structural controls using magnetics rather than EM. EM is beautiful because a lot of the these structures are graphitic shear zones or graphitic metasediments, and they're very tight, so you can see like these flexures and the kinks in the EM data because it just sort of tracks the graphitic packages. But you can accomplish a similar thing using using magnetics if you fly it at a tight enough line spacing. And so we've flown the Hook project at 50-meter line spacing, and you would not believe some of the stuff that you can see using really, really tight magnetics. And so I think that there's a lot of overlooked areas that, in this, uranium cycle and in the ones after that, I've got my eye on a lot of projects that currently are staked, but hopefully people haven't realized the value. And then when they come available, I'm going to be going after them. That there's a lot of potential out there that I think people aren't seeing the value of.
All right. Thank you for the overview, Cameron. James, back to you again. You're the CEO. We want to hear more from you. What is your favorite project? Maybe we talked about the projects a lot, me and Cameron here, but what is your favorite project that you guys have right now?
We have 4 projects, and you're asking me to choose my favorite one. I have 4 kids. If you asked me to choose my favorite one, do you think I'd be able to do that?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Favorite project. I love Shadow. I really love Shadow just because the idea that went behind it, and it all makes sense. It really all makes sense, and I would just love for the opportunity to explore it. Fortunately enough, Catharsis is a mini Shadow. It's the same structural environment, maybe a little bit more to it going on, which is good because there are those superstructures. So Catharsis and Shadow share a lot of similarities, but I still think Shadow nudges everything out. Hook I've had my eyes on Hook for many, many years, and it was never the right time to advance on it. But now, with Baselode, it was just, yeah, this is the right time. Let's see what's down this area. Hook is that superstructure. It's that one that goes up to MacArthur River. It's the fertile. I believed back in the day it was a fertile corridor. Lo and behold, look what's happened with Accio, GMZ in this area along the superstructure. There's mineralization. We're targeting the other end of the superstructure later this year with our drill program. Hopefully there's more mineralization. Hopefully we prove this thesis true that the superstructure is what it is, and it's just a fertile corridor for mineralization, because then we'll have a significant system on our hands. So, Hook's got a lot going for it. Bear's recent staking for as of September of last year up until April of this year, we staked a number of ground as they became available. So it's kind of piecemeal and hodgepodge. Can Alaska have most of the ground between what we have at Bear? So it's an interesting aerial play there. What they're covering a pretty unique area that I think is prospective for more mineralization. So that's a project that we have to advance. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, I'll go back to Shadow. Shadow was the first project we staked. It was, I think there's a lot of things going on that is just ripe for Shadow to have mineralization, but we won't know until we conduct a little bit more geophysics over the area and see what the subsurface is telling us. See if it's worth drilling or not. Because maybe the geophysics just comes back and says, nah, there's no reason for you to be here. Like, all right, and then there's no reason for us to be there. We drill and we go shift focus.
Do you think? And I like Hook because there's something on Hook that I know for sure. I'm not you. I cannot see things as clearly as you do, and I'm
an
cannot
explorationist.
Yeah,
that's my fallacy. I'm sorry. I'm always looking for the next discovery. It's like, oh, there, good, made a discovery. Accio, awesome. Okay, where's the next one?
But you're looking for comparable things, though, and I'm thinking, do you think that, and maybe from your conversations with investor, you would know that that companies that have higher grade deposits, although with worse infrastructures, deeper underground, under lakes, problems with indigenous people, do you think maybe those companies are diverting investment dollars from you in the strategy of finding lower grade deposits that are going to be in production?
No, I don't think they are. I think that, well, to a degree, perhaps everyone loves high grade. Everyone knows the value of high grade, but not all high grade is treated equally. And that's where the economics have to be weighed into any factor. And it's business decision. Business is not going to be built on grade alone. Cigar Lake, which was the second largest high-grade uranium deposit in the world ever discovered, took 40 years to go into production. Why? So it's the economics. It wasn't something they couldn't just fly on right away. There were challenges to it. Even though they knew if they didn't have those challenges mining that ore, they'd be laughing all the way to the bank because it's so valuable. But those challenges weighed in more than the value of the rock. So high grade, can have as much high grade as you want. But if you can't pull it out of the ground, then it stays in the ground and it is worthless. I don't consider our mineralization to be low grade, to be honest. If you were to take all of our assays that were reported in our news releases, 0.05% cutoff, you come up with an average grade about 0.3%. I would not consider that to be a low grade.
You know that, and you think that it's not diverting. But again, you know, you open up a news release, you're reading Athabasca Basin. I want to see 2% higher to call it high grade.
These sophisticated people, the big banks, the guys who write the checks, the people in the uranium market. Like I went to a couple of conferences this year in the uranium space, and you meet with people in the uranium market, and they see things like this. They're like, yeah, that makes sense. It's all about the low amount of energy and low cost you have to put in to start extracting. And if you can make that happen, that's what works. Like if you start thinking about, again, think about Accio. Think about Accio and what it really is. You've got, let's call it 30 meters of overburden, which is all earth moving. It's not overburden. It's all loose material, boulders, clays, sand, silts. 30 meters of that, no blasting. You're just moving earth. You're not mining. It's a two different scenario. Earth moving is much easier than mining. Once you get down to the bedrock, and again, that's 30 meters. Think about DASA, Global Atomic. They're putting a decline down 300 meters, and they're, it's a 12-year operation to get that done. 300 meters to put a decline down before they start mining. I'm talking 30 meters to remove that, and then you start mining, and that's the difference. That you're there. It's like an instantaneous type of thing. You can be there in less than 12 months.
Okay,
So,
but
and then if you look at the geometry of everything, including GMZ, you do your open pit, and then a lot of it would be underground mined as well, but you can link them all up so that everywhere you move, a good possibility for everywhere that you move within the Accio GMZ whole super system is basically all linked. Now, again, to a certain degree. So as it becomes a mining operation, you're always mining material. You're I guess what I'm trying to say is your freaking ore to waste ratio is extremely high.
zero strip.
Because you don't have a lot of waste. Yes, you have a very low strip ratio.
Yeah. Okay, but so this is your vision. I like it. I like when you get that excited. I like when you go ahead and talk about these things in depth and how you see them. But does Canada see eye to eye with you? And what I mean by that is, I guess this is where we move on to the next P, which would be the place. Athabasca Basin often claimed to be the best place for uranium discoveries. And you made a difference between a uranium discovery and a uranium mine very well. You know, discovering a mine or discovering a uranium discovery, big difference. So is the Athabasca Basin also the best place for aspiring small-time producers?
It could be. And I think that is what NextGen's obviously trying to do. That is what Denison's trying to do. If we look at Fission as well, you've got 3 junior companies that are all trying to extract uranium within the Athabasca Basin. And especially for Denison's case, I think they're a good example of the permitting process within Canada, that they're not shut down. I wouldn't expect them to be. It looks like a very low footprint operation. It looks like an interesting way to extract ore, but they're not running into regulatory hurdles, and I think that is a huge positive for the Athabasca and for Canada as well. So I think that shows that Canada is open to new ideas, is open to new methodologies, and is supportive of Canada's place within the whole nuclear stratosphere, within the nuclear market, that we are a reliable provider of uranium goods to the global market, as we should be.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't heard of anything like in any of the processes really with what NextGen's trying to do with Fission. I haven't heard anything on the impactful side that would hinder their processes moving forward. So I think Canada is a good jurisdiction for that.
It's not cheap though. I mean, it's not cheap to drill either. I think you're looking at, as you said, what, $500 to $600 a meter. That's up recently. That's higher than other places where I'm hearing $200 to $300 in South America and so on and so forth, even cheaper. So, I mean, talk to me about costs. You're talking about a smaller operation. It's way too far up in the future. A lot of forward-looking statements. Okay, I know all that, but talk to me about cost.
Cost is in what kind of cost are we estimating here? Exploration costs, I can talk to that, say yes, it is high, but we're also using a helicopter support, and we are renting a camp, which does keep the cost down to a certain degree. But having that helicopters, it adds quite a bit to your budget. Anywhere between 20 to 30% of your budget is helicopter costs and helicopter related. So it does have its negative side effects, but on the other side, it is much easier to use and to do. We've had no issues we like the impact on the ground that we have using a helicopter. And yes, I know, if this does turn into a mine, that all of that was moot, that we were saving the ground for no reason because it would all get stripped anyway. But what if it doesn't turn into a mine? Then the ground has not been disturbed and it is nice and preserved and can right back to nature immediately. So I like the helicopter for that reason and willing to pay those extra costs.
But what about infrastructure? in that case? Because you're saying helicopters.
Yeah, there's infrastructure there, which makes it all worthwhile. We're right close to a kind of like a gas bar. Like a gas bar has accommodations, has a kitchen, but really they've got tanks for diesel and for gas, and we bring in tanks to get jet fuel, and that becomes the base of operations. And it's right off the highway, just due east of the Accio project. So I just fly in about 30 to 40 kilometers in, get the fuel there, and haul it on back into the bush.
So power, water, all that is
Yep.
not that
Power
big of an
runs
issue?
right through the area. Water is no issue because we're right on a lake, so we get all of our natural water. Camp generator, so everything is diesel run. Yes.
Okay, so you don't have a lack of water. Do you have too much water?
No.
Okay.
No, we're good. No too much water.
I guess
I've seen lakes fluctuate water quite a bit, and it's surprising how much they can. But no, things are good.
Canada is like a lake country, have a bazillion of them. So
Yes.
I think we've already been talking about the next B, but if we're not, this would also be a good segue into it, which would be the problems. And yeah, we discussed a few of them, but permitting it is really what I'm mostly wondering about. I get your dream. I believe in it as a shareholder, obviously, and now as I've taken you on as a client, but permitting, talk to me about permitting. What else do you have to do in terms of permits? Maybe also First Nation relationships can come into play here when we're talking about that part. So I'd normally ask you if that's the case for you, if it's an issue, but I guess I won't give you the chance to say that it's not, because it is. I mean, it's a challenge for everybody. Maybe not an issue, but a challenge for everybody. So maybe I'll just ask you, how are you dealing with them? Because, a while back, 2021, you had some issues there. And the First Nations even raised a blockade, if I remember correctly. They said that you were being disrespectful and all these things. So how are you dealing with that now?
Honestly, the strategy hasn't changed. We've been dealing with First Nations in consultation ever since day one. The whole permitting and consultation side of things, we've always wrapped kind of together, and that's just it's something that I've personally been doing. Like I've been consulting with chiefs and councils from a number of different communities in northern Saskatchewan for years, like for over a decade for sure. What happened with what happened for Shadow and Birch Narrows is something that I've never seen before. It was something, it was interesting. We'll just leave it at that. But yeah, our strategy has never changed. To get the permits to explore in northern Saskatchewan, there are certain conditions you have to meet and certain conditions you have to do to be a steward of the North, basically, to make sure that you're not causing destruction on the lands and things like that. And it's something that we've always done. Myself and the others in the company, Cam, that's just the way we've operated. We've always operated as best environmental stewards. And then it's the same thing with consultation. We've always gone in there and consulted with the communities before doing any work. And that's never changed. The job offers are there, the assistance is there, where do the communities have issues with our exploration? Like, I remember a community vehemently telling me stay off the lakes. It's like, done deal. That was an easy thing for us to agree to. And it's not one of these things that would be fearful. We didn't want to be on the big lake. I said, no, that's good. The project might be covering this area just because there are islands over around here that we would consider putting a drill on, but we have no intention of being on the lake anyway. So yeah, it's, you don't know these things if you don't talk to the communities and talk to the people who use the land. So that's obviously, that is one of the things that we do right off the bat. So it's not a hurdle. It's just something that we should all be doing anyway, to be respectful and just, again, stewards of the North, where we're up there trying to discover something. We don't want to make a mess of things. while doing it. And if we do make a discovery, then yes, then we need more permitting down the road, because we have to find out what's going to be affected environmentally with a mine going in operation or things like that. How are the communities going to be affected? Is there more benefits than just jobs? Are they going to get financial benefits? Any kind of potential royalties into said mines for being on the territories? Are they the benefit from infrastructure and things like that, which a lot of them have from the mine sites, from the Cameco and Orano mine sites that are up there now. They have supported the North in a number of different ways that it's amazing. So I can see that there are a lot of good benefits to communities from northern mining operations. That's not saying that that's guaranteed. Oh, here, you get a pass to go mine. No, it doesn't happen. Obviously, everything has to be talked out, and some concessions have to be made and discussed.
It's good that you can see that, because hay fever is sort of stopping me from seeing almost anything. But what permitting is always a challenging one for me, because I don't quite understand the whole, like, everything. So maybe you can walk me through your projects, starting with Hook, and you talk to me about how far are you permitted to go? Like, what kind of permits do you need, and how far can you go on the current permits do you have? So yeah, starting with Hook.
I guess Hook, we are permitted to drill to the end of the year. So when we originally got permits for Hook, I think we were asking for 60,000 meters to be able to drill within a 2-year time frame. Those permits come to an end by December of this year. So all that means is that we basically have to submit a permit closure report showing that, this is what we've done, this is what we said we were going to do, how did it compare to what we said we were going to do. And then we have to file for new permits to continue drilling. So it's kind of at an advantageous stage for us as we were planning to progress into other styles of exploration work at ACCIO, such as the engineering side of things, that we do have to look at permitting new things. So yeah, it's a re-permitting process. It doesn't take long to write a permit. Once you've got a template in place. Again, I've been in this industry for 17 years, and that was one of the first things I started doing working with Dennis. I was writing permits, because I guess nobody else wanted to do them. So I've used a template, modified a template for many, many years. You just get used to writing them, and once you know what you want to do, it's really just a couple of variables that you keep changing and throw on a new map, throw on the application, boom, done. So and then that's a maximum 30 days. They're trying to get it down to 60 days now. I think they're doing a really good job of it, the Ministry of Environment anyway. And Ministry of Environment do the consultation on their end as well, as part of the federal obligations and provincial obligations, which it is to the company's benefit to consult outside of the government and consult very early. So even before you plan on doing any exploration, it's a good idea to get in there and consult and let them know, say, hey, look, this is what we want to do, this is what we're planning to do, this is here, where, there, everywhere, and we're going to put in a application. How do you feel about that?
So that's Hook. What should we go next? Catharsis.
They're all the same though. Like, they're all the same for as far as permitting. Catharsis, Shadow. Let's go through these things. Bear, we have no permits for. We haven't planned drilling there. Any airborne geophysics that we do does not require a permit, so that's pretty easy to do. That's why we like airborne surveys. Plus, they're pretty high resolution nowadays. Bear, no permits, no time frame on getting permits for them. Shadow, same situation. Catharsis, we've got permits in place, but I think they expire by the end of this year, which is fine, because after the winter program, we just realized how much of a burden the camp was, being where it was, that it was proving more costly than what we had originally anticipated. So we had to remove our camp, and that we did that so that we're not forced to go directly into Catharsis right away, that we can stay exploring on Hook, where we do have things already established, like our camp, that we can we can focus on Hook for a good while and just keep drilling in that area, and then we can bounce over to Catharsis. But Catharsis does need exploration dollars. They'll need exploration dollars to keep them in good standing. So it's something that moves pretty fast.
Okay, and that compiles like all the permits. Again, I don't understand them well enough to keep coming up with them, but I know there's endangered wildlife. There's First Nations. There's water, soil, fish, whatever it is.
Air.
Yeah.
Water's a big thing for sure. Yeah.
Okay, but it includes all of them. Okay, so permitted up until the end of the year, and then it's doable to extend them. Good. I guess yet another P behind this, the problems. Anything else that you want to talk about the problems? Like, what keeps you up at night when it comes down to the problems? What's the biggest worry for you?
Not too many. Trying to be a realist about this, about Accio. Obviously, kind of have to be being a CEO. I don't want to overpromise myself or shareholders anything that doesn't really exist. So by doing that, kind of limiting problems that way. If anything, I think the problems are more macroscopic, and the fear is that something happens in the nuclear space that just shuts down all the governments. It not shuts it down, but turns them off of nuclear energy moving forward. So as scary as it sounds, what if something happens in this Russia-Ukraine war? Something happens to one of the plants in the Ukraine. There's been a lot of shelling around these things, and they're still going. But if it's worse than that, what does that do to the market? What does that do to nuclear energy? Honestly, market be damned. We need nuclear energy to meet everyone's greenhouse gas emissions, to have the cleanest, most efficient power source out there to begin with. What we should have been doing from the 70s is more nuclear deployment. But yeah, maybe times are better now because the technology has changed, fuels have changed, are more safer, accident tolerant plants and accident tolerant fuels. So things are better. But that's probably the biggest fear, is something going to happen that is going to swing the sentiment that nuclear has tried to build for so many years, and rightfully so. Something going to knock that train off the rails. As far as Baselode and Accio, really not that concerned. Again, I'm pretty confident and good. I feel like I'm solidly grounded in what we are doing at Baselode, in what we are seeing at Accio, that I have a realistic view of things. But I've never brought a deposit into a mining scenario, never brought a deposit into an operation. I've never been part of a mining scenario. I've researched a heck of a lot. I've got databases that I put together and have shared, and have some good number crunching abilities. But that obviously won't be enough for any real decisions. But I think it's good enough to keep things grounded into reality, and not, oh, this is the greatest thing in the world. This is our 250 million pound Pod 2 MacArthur. Not yet. We're getting there. I do believe they exist.
Sure do.
Oh, they have to. Absolutely have to. There's one on Shadow, there's one on Catharsis, there's one on Hook, and there's one on Bear. Okay? The billion pounds of uranium right there. Yeah. More than forward-looking statements. Wishful thinking unicorns.
Yeah. No, it's good to mention these things. But also what comes in play is that even if it were there, timing is also a thing. And time for small companies can be very costly. I guess this is also yet another nice segue into yet another P. This one would be the patience. This usually comes last for me. And if you ask my wife, it never comes for me. But what I mean by patience really is timeline. Like, how long do I need to be patient for you to achieve what your dream scenario that you told me about with GMZ and all that, and open permitting and open pit and in a small operation, and you're running it, all that? Is this do I need to wait for 10 years? I mean, how long do you think it's going to take?
Maybe if we want to assume the whole mining scenario side of things, we're still pretty adamant that we can get an initial resource out by the end of this year. May not be fully comprehensive, but it should be more of our better zones encapsulated within a resource resource quality, and we'll see what comes out. So that's being expedited. History of open pits within the Athabasca and northern Saskatchewan, anywhere from 6 to 12 years from discovery into production. 6 to 12 years. Some of the last ones, Sioux deposits, again, they fit that quite nicely. Actually, I think they were less than 10 years, but they were pretty rapid to get into production. So it is possible to really expedite these type of discoveries. At least it has been historically. What has changed in the past 15, 20 years? No idea, because there hasn't been an open pit that tried to get mined since then. So patience is definitely key. But that's kind of one of the benefits that we've got that we have behind Baselode, is that we've got multiple projects. We're not just a one-trick pony. So even with Accio, as we advance Accio, so now Accio, as of September 2021, you can start your clock ticking. Here's your 6 to 12 years. If they don't move it by then they're full of crap. You can you can call me up and tell me you're full of crap, James. I'll be like, yep, I deserve that. But hopefully it doesn't come to that. Hopefully you'll call me up and say, damn, you're right, man. So the clock is ticking on Accio. We've got more exploration. You make another discovery, that clock starts ticking. And we've got multiple projects. So if we can make discoveries along these ways, then that builds the excitement within the company as well. But I think it does more. I think it would do more for the company to have additional discoveries, because then it would really build up our track record and build up our the mythos behind Baselode and the guys behind it. So I think that's guys and gals behind it, but that's something that we would like to achieve and just get some more credibility behind us, and people would, I think shareholders would support us nicely, because they know that their money would be in good hands with people who are going to make more discoveries. As we're working to make our initial discovery to go into production, which then everything just goes click, 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 like a lock, fits nicely.
Yeah, I'd like to see that happening. There's lots of work to be done.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Again, it's
and
nice.
It doesn't get done by sleeping. That's why. So things do have to keep me up at night. Good things though, not stressful things. Things that want to get done.
Well, that's why we've come full circle. We're back in the elevator. We've probably went from Belgium to Canada with the elevator.
Yeah, no kidding, eh?
The last P.
Hyperloop trains.
I have one more P. Unless I'm missing some. Last P would be the price, and I haven't brought it up yet because it's almost silly for me to talk about the price of uranium stocks right now, because they've just been beaten down so much. But it's also hard to value something like your company, in my opinion. I can go the geologist way and just assume that everything is square and do, volume by grade by density factor and so on and so forth. But I don't, not all pounds are created equal. I don't like that too much. But I mean, $40 million market cap. Let me ask it to you that way. Would you, looking at the 4 projects that you have right now, Hook, Catharsis, Shadow Bear, would you pay $10 million for each? Would you, if you had no projects right now, but you had $40 million, would you buy these 4 projects as a package today?
No. Because that's too much of an ask. That's a ridiculous price on those projects. But that's any project. I would have that scrutinous view.
How come?
Because when it comes to staking, you can stake for so cheap that if you're paying 1,000 times what you staked, there's an issue with that.
But can you find that in the basin again, what you have right now?
No, I know that is one of the issues. Yeah, that is one of the issues. That's why Bear is what it is, because it is, as soon as land becomes available, it's a mad staking rush, and everyone tries to get their portions of it. We've always strategized by focusing on the areas that we want to get first, and we've been very fortunate getting, especially with Bear, getting a lot of the areas that we wanted to get. But to go in there and pay 10 million for a project, or 10 million for all 4 projects, the 10 million for all 4 is more doable. since 2.5 million a project, that's still, that's a few drill programs. That's 2.5 million. If you've got $500 a meter, you're putting a lot of drill meters into the ground for $2.5 million. So that's why I see that as a loss. Like that's why I value these types of scenarios that, or could I do better justice with a company going out, finding some open ground, really, really digging deep into the area, finding open ground and staking something for far less money, using the 2.5 million to explore, hopefully find something. I'd rather go that route.
That's from a company perspective, but I mean, as a retail investor, you're asking me to, at $40 million valuation, go into these projects.
And that's why it's a company. That's the company perspective. Exactly. We don't want to. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. We got in at the right time, and that's a lot of it was all timing. And I couldn't be more thankful. And that was, getting back into knowing me. That was one of the reasons why I jumped. Is being a nuclear bull, I saw the tide turning. I thought it was a great venture to get into. It was here's the company. Let's brand it around Mr. Sykes and see what he can do. So all of the projects that we've staked have all been from my conception, and the Athabasca 2.0. That was Charles and I who put that together. It's been a lot of fun. It was a great opportunity, one that I would never have. Yeah, I'm thankful I jumped on it. Let's just put it that way.
Right. All right. Think I'm all through. Oh, I have one more P. I have the promotion. I know that you don't like doing too much of it. But what are you doing? You're traveling this year. What are you doing over? I mean, what's sort of the general plan for telling the story? Because you're going to nuclear conferences as well, which is interesting to me. Why are you spending money on these things?
To learn about the market that we're invested in. Nuclear is a niche market. It's not like gold. It's going to be following a lot of currencies or what's happening macroscape. To a degree, nuclear does follow macroscape, especially with CO2 and climate agendas that governments are pushing. But I really wanted to get the inside scoop on a lot of things. Wanted to hear it directly from the people in the marketplace, people who live, eat, breathe nuclear energy, who are in the uranium mining space, or even the other facets of the whole nuclear industry, like conversion and enrichment. It's quite a unique process that is involved in the whole nuclear cycle. There's a lot of components to it, so I just feel like I'm much wiser in the whole grand scheme of things. And I guess going to these, so I talked at one of these conferences, the IAEA conference, and just to give some more light on Athabasca 2.0 and kind of spread the word. So just passing words out like that. But at another conference, there were people who were in the market for 50 odd years, spent all of their lifetime in the nuclear market as traders or just working at utilities or other things, but just all involved in nuclear energy. And then there are people who just started in the market space, but they're all saying the exact same thing, that throughout the nuclear market, this is the hottest any of them have ever seen it. That all of the fundamentals are looking so amazing for uranium, for nuclear energy right now, that this is the hottest market they've ever seen. So yeah, I think that's value added. Like I can't find that type of information online. I can't get that feeling that you get from these places online. That's, there's an energy to it. And so when you witness it and you know that it's genuine, you know that there is a really strong commitment to prioritize nuclear energy. So that's one side of the marketing side. We're trying to expand our marketing reach. So not just North America, but also start to make ties into Europe as well. Very good reception in Europe. So I think that's definitely going to be an area to revisit. But we've been a little bit slow on the globals, or not the global, but the generalized marketing side of things. So just using companies to pitch out our news and things like that. We've been hard holding the reins and well, reining everything in basically. But now that we are active again, we're going to push our news out a little bit more and try to get a little bit more exposure through a couple of different different service providers. So now that we're active, it's time to re-promote.
Okay.
If we're gonna do one last P, I'll hit the button on the elevator for parking so we can get off.
That's a good point. Yeah, we've been at it for a while, haven't we?
Yeah.
Thank you, James.
That's been good though. It's been very fun.
No, it has been very fun. I don't think you've ever done such a detailed overview of Baselode in a in an interview format. So I appreciate you doing this. Thank you, and thank you to anybody listening so far up this video. And thank you to Cameron and Joel for participating as well. Again, forward-looking statements were said in this quite a lot of hopeful, wishful thinking. So yeah. Be careful out there. Do more research. Use the oldest website on the planet, setter.com, to figure out what's really going on. And yeah, thanks so much for being here, James.
Thanks a lot, Antonio. It's been a pleasure. Great talk. Thank you.